Amongst the various forms of religious belief, both Jewish and non-Jewish, there is a branch that comes under the heading of universalism. Within universalism, religion cannot be separated from other aspects of life. One cannot separate one's religious activities from one's other activities not linked into the religion per se, an approach that is polar opposite to that found in modern Western cultures. To many subscribing to this belief system, gods are involved in every aspect of life, both the positive and the negative. For example, to a world that could not provide a scientific explanation, one's cow that did not produce milk was attributed to God's displeasure, and therefore this God must be appeased. Conversely, when the sun rises in the morning, when the rains come, this is attributed to God, and an expression of thanks is in place. To the primitive mind, there was a pantheon of pagan gods. This then morphed into a form of monotheism, with a non-physical, invisible God replacing the pagan deity. Even in modern Western cultures, many people see supernatural forces behind every happening. In Yahadut, in Judaism, this interaction between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the world has a name. We refer to it as Hashgachah Peratit, a belief in a divine control and supervision over the individual, a thought discussed in rabbinic literature, and a concept that underpins much of Orthodox Judaism's worldview, and in particular as regards to questions of interaction with the natural world. There is a popular conception that religions each have identifiable and exclusive sets of beliefs and creeds. Surveys, however, have found that there is a disconnect between the official doctrine and beliefs prevalent within the particular religion and those privately held beliefs of those who identify as members of a particular religion. In other words, there is a disconnect between religious belief and religious practice. This is certainly the case within Judaism, where at best we might have 10 to 20% of those defining themselves as Jews who are practicing Jews. The remainder, from the standpoint of Orthodox Judaism, would be non-practicing Jews, ranging from left-wing centrist, traditional conservative, reform progressive, and secular Jews, majority of whom, if only for socio-ethnic reasons, would have no trouble accepting the existence of a supernatural being, a God. It is the translation of that acceptance into the real world that underpins the various groups within Judaism. Put differently, the acceptance of God's intervention in the activities of man mark the differences between the practicing and the non-practicing Jew. To the non-practicing Jew, we have science to explain the unknown. To the practicing Jew, it would be God pulling the strings to control the forces of nature. And therefore, to those surviving the catastrophic Mabul, it would have been quite natural for them to attribute this tragic event to God's displeasure with the direction that mankind had taken, and they would logically have then set about correcting the situation so as to prevent a future Mabul. Shifts in the tectonic plates causing a tsunami that virtually obliterated their known world was not on their radar. In his interpretation to the words V'chein lo yeyaseh with respect to the abduction of Dinah, Rashi writes, Sheha umot Gadru atzman min ha'arayot al yedei ha'mabul. On account of the Mabul, the Umot, the nations that evolved from the survivors, set in place a series of restrictions regarding sexual morality. This was their interpretation as to the causes of God's anger resulting in the Mabul. This is drawn from the Medrash Rabbah. We noted that there were problems with respect to corroborating this information, and without corroboration one must then rely on the fact that the scholars wrote with Ruach HaKodesh. Unfortunately, the two positions are mutually exclusive, and both result in a trivialization of Midrashic literature. A third option is that the Midrash is offering a possible way to deal with the textual anomalies. Whether it is provable or not is not the issue. The test is whether or not it is reasonable. And in the context of a pre-science mindset, the explanation provided by the Midrash meets the test of reasonableness. And thereby we can validate the assertion of the Midrash and Rashi's application of this Midrash to the abduction of Dinah as an act that violated tribal custom, a prohibition against sexual immorality.